The producer of this film realizes that this work may be deemed controversial. We want to state here that we are not going to disparage anyone's belief system on any account. That is not our intention. That being said, millions of people gather at Fatima every year making pilgrimages to Mary. Millions of Muslims encircle the Kaaba stone in Mecca. Millions of Hindus celebrate Guru Puja. Millions of Buddhists worship at thousands of temples. People have the right to believe what they want to, and we respect the rights of those who may have different beliefs than we do. Thus, while this film is about the events of Fatima, which happened 100 years ago, we will focus primarily on the phenomena of October 13, 1917, and what has become to be known as the miracle of the sun. You will hear from a variety of scientists, scholars, theologians, historians, researchers, and others who will weigh in on the events of October 13. We will present the facts, mostly taken from the 1917 original documents and interrogation of the many witnesses who were present at Fatima. Portugal is a modern country with all the accoutrements of an advanced technical society. However, in 1917 there were no airplanes in Portugal, and Fatima was a small, out-of-the-way village. People lived off what the land could produce, and many were shepherds. In Lisbon that year, a group of psychics met, and through the occult technique known as automatic writing, received a message. The automatic writing was backwards and read right to left, and could only be deciphered by using a mirror. The entity who came through the medium signed the message Stella Matutina, the bright morning star. The group of spiritualists and psychics published their message in the paper in Lisbon, which stated that something wondrous would happen in Portugal soon. We interviewed Arnaldo Costiera, who is a psychic with a direct connection to the original group of psychics who posted the announcement in the Lisbon paper 100 years ago.
In 1917, 2 months prior, before the apparitions happened at Fatima, Portugal, someone who was a spiritualist had an automatic writing which predicted something was going to happen that would be fantastic in Portugal. Tell us about that.
Because of the war, people were attending these spiritual retreats.
À procura de notícias dos seus familiares.
Yeah, they were seeking news from their relatives in the war.
A desespero e a aflição era generalizado no país.
Desperation was something general in the country.
Portugal entrou na guerra pouco tempo antes e não havia notícias.
Portugal had entered in the war and there were no news from the relatives. Lack of communications, of course.
Os políticos, os republicanos.
There were several of these centers that would regularly receive messages from the other side.
Okay, when you say receive messages from the other side, how were they receiving those messages?
As mensagens, a intermediação, o intermediário, que eram os médiuns, eram...
Through the mediums, through the channelers.
Tinham várias características. Ou falavam, não é?
They would speak.
Ou escreviam.
Or they would write.
So when they're writing, is that automatic writing? Is that what you're talking about?
Mas era mais uma escrita chamada psíquica, chamada espiritual.
They call it spiritual writing.
Mm-hmm. Was the automatic writing that predicted Fatima, what did that look like? Was it backwards? Or was it just forwards?
Foi da direita para a esquerda.
From right to left. So you would have to put it on a mirror.
On a mirror. Mm-hmm. So this is like what Leonardo da Vinci would do with his codexes. What exactly did the writing say? What exactly did it say?
It referred specifically the date of the 13th of May. 2 days prior to the 13th of May, another message was received and published. Yes,
What did that say?
Dizia que é 13 de maio, portanto, ela foi publicada no dia 13 de maio, de manhã, nos jornais.
It was published exactly on the 13th of May, early in the morning, stating that something would happen. Something would happen.
The entity that spoke or channeled through the mediums, in the automatic writing that the mediums wrote on a piece of paper, it was signed Stella Matutina,
Which is
the rising morning star or the star of dawn.
I'm here with Pastor Mark Kahn. My first question is, these group of psychics got together and they engaged in something we call automatic writing. They call automatic writing.
the writing read right to left. It could only be understood when held up to a mirror.
At the end, the message was signed Stella Matutina. First, address why we should be wary of automatic writing. And my second question to you, who in your opinion is the Stella Matutina that is signing this message coming through from, let's say, the other side?
As far as automatic writing goes, we have some scriptural evidence that seems to point to some of the things that may be involved. We have evidence from Scripture where people were not in control of their actions, but in fact they were being controlled through entities we would, as Bible believers, call demons. I think that this is exactly what we're seeing here. These individuals are not in control of themselves. They're not controlling their bodies. That in fact they're inhabited by something else. It's not an idea of a split personality or some type of schizophrenia, but you don't have multiple personalities inside of one body. You literally have multiple persons, multiple entities inhabiting a single body, and one of those entities takes control of that body, and then as a result you have this type of automatic writing, because it's something that probably most people aren't going to be able to do, certainly writing it backwards like this. And then they're unaware that it's occurring. They're not controlling it. I think we see something similar whenever we find individuals participating in things like a Ouija board. Now, many of the things that we've heard about Ouija boards, I think, are probably just urban legend, but we're also, most of us are aware, and it's not difficult to find individuals who've had some type of an encounter where they didn't control the outcome, but the outcome pointed to something that was startling and would have been supernatural in origin. I think that's exactly what we're seeing in this instance as well. As far as who is signing their name, who could this entity be? I would say that I think that it's someone who is in that heavenly kingdom, the unseen kingdom, who is interacting with the physical realm. And they're making themselves manifest by using these individuals or persons so they can influence the events that are taking place around the world. And I don't think their intentions are good.
It was 1917, and in the small village of Fatima, Portugal, 3 young children, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, experienced something that was by all accounts supernatural. A woman appeared to them who said she was from the sky. When they told their parents what they had seen, they were met with skepticism. Word got back to the parish priest, who was also wary of the children's testimony. This mysterious woman, who in the words of the children was brighter than the sun, instructed the children to return on the 13th of every month, and she appeared to them for 6 consecutive months. Soon word got out that Our Lady Mary was appearing in Fatima, and the village was turned upside down as people from all over Portugal flocked to the site in hope of seeing the miraculous. The apparition appeared on the 13th of the month from May to October, but only Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta could see her. In October 13, 1917, an event occurred that still amazes and perplexes those who know about it. True to her word, the lady appeared like she promised she would. She had told the children that there would be a sign for the people to see. Over 70,000 people were gathered in Fatima that day, and they witnessed something supernatural. The sun began to dance in the sky. to change colors and then descend toward the terrified onlookers. This event was called the Miracle of the Sun. We will explore the events of what happened 100 years ago and seek to discover whether this object that appeared was, in fact, the sun, or perhaps, as the title of this film suggests, a harbinger of deception. Fina de Armada was the author of 44 books. In 1978, de Armada gained access to the sanctuary at Fatima, Portugal, where the original records and photographs of the events of 1917 are kept. De Armada was writing a paper on influential women of Portugal, and she applied for a scholarship to study the role of women in the First Republic, 1910 to 1926. She said she wanted to learn about the life of Maria Carriara, which was the woman that collected money to build the first chapel in Fatima. Maria Carriara was the mother of the fourth seer, Carolina Carriara, who was one of the children who saw the apparition in Fatima. Maria thought Carolina would be an interesting study. De Armada was given access to the original 1917 records that were recorded from May 13th, as well as after the phenomena known as the Miracle of the Sun, which occurred in October of that year. What she found seemed to differ from the official story. She published her findings and later teamed up with Dr. Joaquim Fernandes, whose books explored the events of Fatima from a scientific perspective. De Armada passed away in 2014. However, Fina de Armada's daughter, Frederica, gave us an exclusive interview for this film.
I'm here with Frederica Claro de Armada, and it is a real honor to be here. Your mother, Fina de Armada, wrote this book, which was the original book, and she had access to the sanctuary at Fatima. Tell us how she was able to do that.
She needed an idea to get inside the secret archives, so she decided to study the role of women in the First Republic, Portuguese First Republic.
Okay.
So the Republic was from 1910 to 1923, so 1917 was in the middle, and she got a scholarship to study that. So she arrived at Fatima with the letter from the scholarship saying she was going to study the role of the women in Fatima and the important women that gathered the money and started the chapel. So that's how she got in.
That's how she got in. How much access did she actually have with the documents?
She only had a day and a half to 2 days, and she had to sign a document saying exactly what she wanted. So she had to know previously what she wanted. They never said, come in and see everything we have. No, she had to ask for it. But they gave her everything she asked.
Was she allowed to take photographs?
No.
No.
No, she could write. So she had a tape recorder and she read out loud everything she wanted.
What year was this when she was doing this?
78.
78. Why was she so interested in what happened at Fatima?
Well, the idea came from Joaquim Fernandes, a news writer. So my mother wrote articles to a newspaper, the Jornal Notícias in Porto, about women and women in history. And they became friends, and he was the one that had the idea that she helped him investigate. So they started together. But for this part of the story, she was the one that wrote the book, and she had to publish it, because when she entered the archives, she had to sign a document. And in that document, she was bound to write only for her scholarship. So this part of the work had to be only hers. And it's only the history, what really happened, all the testimonies, and another other investigation with the depositions. So afterwards, they wrote a book together a year later, where we can see other conclusions and a parallel between what was found that happened and other sites in the world.
There were upwards of, let's say, between 50 and 70,000 people
Yes.
on October 13th, 1917. And they were the reason why they gathered there, because the children, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, stated that there was going to be a sign. They had been told to ask the lady for a sign. And so they came back and said, yes, there will be a sign on October 13th. And so there's upwards of, let's just round the number off, 70,000 people in the field. It's a lot of people back then. There are photographers, there's newspaper people. But yet we have two versions of the event. We have one version which says that it's the sun which falls from the sky and begins to spin. And we know from science that the sun has not moved at all. We understand that. So what did your mother find in the archives? What were the witness testimonies? What did they see?
Well, the witness never saw the sun. The sun was a title in a newspaper that one news reporter wrote.
Said.
Yes, and he was an atheist, actually, not a religious person. And he said it was the sun. But even in his writings, we could see that it wasn't the sun. So the witnesses saw a disc, a silver disc, not a shiny disc.
Dull silver disc.
Yes,
Is that a fair statement?
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. They saw a cloud. The cloud came in front of the sun, covered the sun. Then the cloud opened, and the disc came from the cloud. And the disc went down and then up, back into the cloud, and then the cloud left, and they could see the sun again.
And so it was about what, 10 minutes, 14 minutes, were the phenomena,
sure.
a period of time.
Yes.
Now, how many testimonies do we have from the 1917 interrogations of the witnesses that talk about silver disc? Are there one or two or many?
There are many.
Many.
Yes. And they describe sometimes different things depending on their position on the ground. Because you have a large area and the sun came a route this way, but some people were here, some people were close, some were under the sun. So they saw different things. But you have several testimonies. But back then, in 1917, we didn't have the television, so not everyone was interviewed. Some spoke to the newspapers, but only a few. Others spoke years later, but you don't really have the testimony of all of them. Just few that...
So we have a few, but we spoke to Dr. Manuel Gadra, who talked about a lawyer being present in that field. So the people who are seeing this something happening, we'll just call it an atmospheric disturbance. I don't want to use the word miracle. Something is going on that people are seeing with the naked eye. So it's an event. And what is this object? Something is moving, and they're seeing this object move. Describe what the object looked like to the witnesses.
It was a bright object.
A bright object.
Yes.
Okay.
Some people have some different descriptions or not similar descriptions.
But that's normal. You get 10 people looking at something, and they're going to each see.
And there were people that never saw nothing. did not see nothing. So it is like that.
You mentioned that the object made what appeared to be right-angle turns.
Yes. Sometimes it did. It did right-angle moves.
How long did this phenomena last at Fatima?
It lasted several minutes and then disappeared completely.
A particular cloud that is reported to be in front of the sun. The cloud moved in front of the sun, and then from there the disk came.
The disc came. Did they describe what the disc looked like?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Yes, silver, not a shiny disc. Some people reported that it had lights in the surround parts, blinking lights.
Okay.
And some said the bottom part was wider than the parts on top. And there are people that saw beings inside, 3 beings inside.
Dr. Joaquim Fernandez is the co-author of 3 books with Fina de Armada. Together, their unique partnership uncovered the facts regarding the events that took place in Fatima. Much of what they discovered remains groundbreaking in that the information they gleaned from the 1917 records does not necessarily jibe with the official version of events. Dr. Fernandez continues to head an eclectic team of researchers, historians, philosophers, neuroscientists, and others who combine their varied expertise in academic disciplines to the events which happened in Fatima 100 years ago.
Professor Dr. Joaquim Fernandez, it is an honor to be here with you, sir. You co-authored a book with Fina de Armada, Celestial Lights. I've read the books, they're fantastic, and they're really well researched from a scientific viewpoint. My first question to you is, when Fina was in the sanctuary, she was looking at the records from 1917. Where are those records now?
Are still in Fatima archives.
What do you think appeared on October 13th, 1917? What appeared to the people?
This is an amazing subject. Some kind of physical phenomena happened.
There's a testimony from a lawyer who was present at the Miracle of the Sun. And he says he looked up and saw a dull silver disc object.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
The witness from Dr. Almeida Garrett is a lawyer from Coimbra.
Okay.
He's among some other witness from the same kind. It's not only Almeida Garrett that refers a dual disc. Something came out from the sky.
There's a very interesting dynamic in the modern UFO phenomena, and it is this. Many witnesses who have encounters describe a cloud just kind of coming out of nowhere, or clouds forming, and then out of those clouds comes a craft, what we would call the classic silver disc, classic UFO. So the witnesses in 1917 are seeing, in my opinion, exactly that. There's a cloud that forms in front of the sun, and then the object comes out.
Among the clouds open, and something are coming above the crowd. Something give an indication that the object came out something 30 meters above the terrain, the crowd above the heads, and so.
So it's very close to the people.
The people that were gathered in the field on October 13th, when this thing came at them, some of them were terrified. Tell us about that. How the disc moved in the sky.
This kind of object, this kind of energy that it display, and made some maneuvers, impossible maneuvers of a leaf that
like a leaf
falling,
okay.
And after came to the sky 3 times. This kind of maneuvers. And then the object disappears.
Manuel Curado, thank you so much for coming on the record with us. We're very interested about your take on what happened in Fatima 100 years ago, specifically in regard to what is known as the miracle of the sun. What's your take on that? What do you think it was?
From my point of view, it is important to have the big picture of all that happened in Fatima, not only in 1917, but since spring 1915.
Okay.
And there are a few indications that a imprecise shape, an angel-like shape, appeared in the spring of 1915 without a head, without a precise contour of the figure, and said something to the shepherds. So
the same 3 shepherds?
And other kids also.
Okay.
Not only Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, but also other kids.
Okay.
So we have a very interesting set of events, not only in 1917, but even before.
Where does the source for the 1915 apparition come from? What is the source? How do we know that that happened?
We have a oral description by Lucia, describing the events of 1915. And it is like a pattern that happened not only in Fatima but in other places also. A first appearance of something, whitish, milk-like something, an entity milk-like, soaring above the landscape, and many months after this first contact, the full set of the Marian-like apparitions unfolded itself. It was incredible. It seems like that the Fatima apparitions had a kind of protocol, a kind of script. A first contact, very imprecise, very ghostly. And in the final part of the set, the sun miracle, the prophecies, the dryness of the clothes, the dance of the sun, everything. But there is a first contact and a last contact. So it is a kind of a serial production of something.
Is it safe to say this? From the first contact where we get this, your words, ghostly-like image, to the last contact, October 13th, 1917, where upwards of 70,000 people are in that field, and something happens that defies the natural realm as we know it.
Yes.
And witnesses, there was one witness in particular, I don't remember the lawyer's name, but apparently he's on record, as stating he looked up and saw a dull silver disc. And again, back in 1917, the words UFO and flying saucer were not part of a lexicon. So he's looking up, he has no words to describe this except as a dull silver disc. Do you think that this was the sun, or was it a craft, in your opinion?
In my opinion, it was a craft.
Okay.
Something built by an entity, a power of other realms, not of this world, but definitely not the sun, something else.
Thank you for coming on the record.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We took a break from our interviews and took in some of the historic sites in Portugal, which were breathtaking. The next day, we met up with Dr. Manuel Domingos, who is a neuroscientist. Dr. Domingos' research of the miracle of the sun was very revealing, to say the least.
Dr. Domingos, thank you for giving us your time to come on the record on this film about Fatima. And a lot happened at Fatima. 50 to 80 to 100,000 people were there. They saw something on October 13th, 1917. People call it the miracle of the sun. Let's go back in time and pretend it's 1917. I'm one of the people in that field in Fatima. I'm waiting for something. All of a sudden at 1 o'clock, I see the clouds part and something comes down. Lucia cries, "Here she comes." Something is there in the sky. We all see it. It's zigzagging and spiraling and dancing in the sky. And some people see it. Other people don't see anything. Sometimes people see different things. How do you account for that?
First of all, it was not the sun. That's the point. It was not the sun that was dancing in the sky. I think what they saw was an object, metal object, that came through the clouds. And most of the people saw that object. There was a medical doctor that describes that object.
How did the doctor describe that object?
Describes as a silver color and a circle that moves in circles. He said it was not the sun. It was an object, a perfect object that came through the clouds. Most of the people saw that object, but
it wasn't the sun.
It was no.
It was something in front of the sun.
Yeah, like a flying saucer.
Like a UFO.
UFO.
And we have to remember, back in 1917, the words UFO and flying saucer were not part of the global lexicon. It wasn't there.
No.
So people would look at this and say, I look up and saw a dull silver disc. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. That doctor and the lawyer, two lawyers, and I think a priest too, they didn't misunderstood the.
So, without trying to disparage anyone there, the priest, the doctor, and the lawyer were educated.
Yeah.
And so they're not peasants, they're educated men, and they're looking at this phenomena and they know it's not the sun. Now, is their testimony a written testimony?
Yeah.
It is?
Mainly the testimony of Dr. Jens was the medical doctor that he wrote what he saw. He said that it was not the sun. It was an object that...
an object in front of the sun.
In front of the sun, yeah. If they... and he said too that if it was the sun...
Couldn't look at it.
Couldn't look at it. But this is very clear. This is the same thing we hear today about the visions, UFOs. It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. So do you, without putting words in your mouth, do you correlate, do you make a connection between what happened in that field in 1917 and the modern day UFO event?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
Why is that? Because that's a very controversial position to take.
Yes, I know that's very controversial. I think there's no other explanation. The word aircraft.
There were no aircraft in Portugal. No aircraft in Portugal. From a neurological perspective, everyone is seeing something. In your opinion, was this a mass hallucination or was it a physical?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
From a neurological perspective?
No, I don't think so. You could call it a mass hallucination if they already knew about the existence of such objects. And what can I say is that, for instance, that doctor was a mentally healthy man, and he described the object
very
clearly, etc. And it was not an hallucination. I don't believe in that theory.
Dr. Bob Thiel holds a master's degree from the University of Southern California and a PhD from the Union Institute and University. His writings have made him a sought-after expert in the fields of philosophy, religion, research, science, and prophecy. In the past 15 years, he has published scores of articles on these topics in a variety of respected print publications. Dr. Thiel has also received several awards for his research.
Dr. Bob Thiel, thank you so much for coming on the record. You know, something happened in 1917, and we can see the picture right here of Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, and 10, 9, and 7. These are small children. Let's start there, because they saw something which shook their world. Tell us about the original sighting, which is recorded in your book, Fatima Shock.
Well, the original sighting happened on May 13th, 1917. And as you mentioned, these three children saw something. Now, what they saw said it was a lady. It didn't say it was Mary. And what they saw disturbed them.
During the miracle of the sun, whether it's 40, 70, 100,000, we don't know the numbers, okay? But we do know this. There were lots of people from the press, but there were
photographers there. Surely somebody, because the miracle of the sun, it wasn't just this little 30-second deal. It lasted, I believe, what, 15 minutes or something?
Something in that range.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long time. Surely, and remember, photographers are photographers. They're going to get the shot. Why do you think there's not one picture of the so-called miracle of the sun?
There's a couple of possibilities. One is, and this was bizarre, that would be none of the photographers are paying attention at the right time, but that doesn't make any sense because the crowds are there.
Right.
The other is, though, consider that it was only these three children who ever saw it. And not the miracle of the sun, but they saw the lady who showed up. The lady showed up then. Nobody saw that either. So perhaps that was also a demonic manifestation, didn't show up on film. I don't know why it didn't show up.
I know sometimes, and this, we're going to stretch here, but in ufology, sometimes when you take pictures of UFOs, the camera goes wacky, it doesn't show up on film, or it'll show as a streak of light. What the eye sees and what the camera picks up can be two different things. But there is, as far as I know, there is not one picture of the so-called miracle of the sun. It doesn't exist. And I want to ask you something, again, with the miracle of the sun. And this to me is what is very alarming about this whole matter that we're discussing. Whatever the number was in the field, let's just pick 70,000 people. And the fact that 70,000 people's paradigm was changed in an instant, I find alarming. Your thoughts?
Well, certainly it was alarming. They saw something. But again, we're warned in Scripture about signs and lying wonders. And the Bible makes it clear that Satan can do certain things, and his demons can do certain things. But people think, oh, I saw it with my own eyes, therefore it must be from God. And the Bible says, no, if they're not teaching the truth, you can't believe them, even if you do see signs or miracles and that type of thing. Now, as far as pictures go, there actually was a picture, I believe on the copy of either Time magazine or another magazine, that supposedly had a picture of the miracle of the sun.
That was doctored.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was not only doctored, it was done later, and it was not correct.
Yeah.
So I always wonder when things have to be faked to try to prove something.
Yeah, it's fake news even back then.
In your opinion, Fina is looking at the black and white photographs. Okay, I understand that, but do you think there are other photographs that the people have not seen?
As far as I know, I never heard about that. The originals are kept at this moment in Fatima.
At the sanctuary.
At the sanctuary, in the vault.
It was,
we have the false photographs published in the United States.
We discussed that.
Life magazine.
Yeah,
Life magazine.
Why?
This is the sun.
Because the position of the sun.
But in this case, we can think that he tried to make something else than the reality.
And more important, in the original glass plates, photographic glass plates, we had the original photo of the sun, the photo of the sun. However, the manipulation of the glass plates along 100 years erodes the corner of the plate where the image of the original sun were. So that is quite a loss.
So it doesn't exist anymore.
The plate
exists,
does, but however, the image of the sun is gone.
Erodes. It's natural.
According to some of what I read, specifically from the books Heavenly Lights by Fina Di Armata and Joaquin Fernandez, talking about Father Fiera sitting down with the witnesses only 2 years after the fact. And the people in the field are saying, I looked up and saw a dull silver disc. And I want to, what's your takeaway on that when you hear that?
Well, this disc type of phenomenon has actually showed up in so-called UFO sightings.
Okay.
I looked into that, and I saw some witnesses said they saw that, and some that did not. In my opinion, it's got to do with a demonism or paganism. Beyond that, you can speculate as to what that might be.
I do think something occurred. I think these people saw something, they experienced something. I don't think it was some form of a mass hallucination or some type of a delusion. I think that they actually experienced something that took place in the physical world. They saw something, some of them heard something. I think it was this unseen kingdom making itself manifest in our world, in our reality, and doing so for its own purposes, purporting to be one thing and trying to deceive people who would believe that so that they could, in fact, influence events for their own purposes.
Professor, thank you so much for coming on the record with us about the events at Fatima. And you're here to address the mechanics of how things may have worked at Fatima. Tell us about that.
Oh, Fatima had so many components that is quite tough to describe all of them. The major question in Fatima, normally, is the question of the dance of the sun.
The miracle of the sun.
Yeah,
yes.
so-called miracle of the sun. Why so-called? Because first, the common people must never forget that if the sun is of the size of a watermelon, the earth, in comparison by size, is like a head of a match. So it's so tiny. How come the sun can descend upon the earth?
It can't.
It can't.
So it has to be something other than the sun.
Yes, just for that, because you must count with the situation, astronomical situation of moving planets. All the solar system will be destroyed if you move the sun.
Of course.
And the temperature, of course. 6 degrees centigrade in the surface. So the big question is, first kind of the miracle of the sun, making circles in the sky.
Something is moving like this.
Yeah, it's very, very strange, you may say, very strange. But several studies, namely by Professor Messin from the Louvain University, I have the study here, describes several situations when you look too much to the sun, the real sun. You begin to see things that do not really exist due to the physiological mechanisms of the eye and the mind. As you see, what we look maybe is not the reality of the moment. The big issue is how come the sun could descend to 100 feet above the heads of the people.
It can't, obviously.
It's quite strange.
Yes.
Look, we are talking about 50 to 70,000 people in the place. Let's say that a minority see that phenomena. We can talk about 5,000 people, 7,000 people. There are too many people, too many witnesses.
So something, is it safe to say that something happened at Fatima that was real and that was experienced by 50 to 70,000 people?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not an isolated, not 2 or 3 people.
No.
Everyone is seeing something. Something is happening and the entire crowd is experiencing it together.
Fatima is the real thing, as I used to say.
Okay.
A study due to Fatima due to Professor Joaquim Fernandes and Fina Darmada lead us to make a map. Then they make this first map with the points, and each point is one person that suffers some kind of physical effect or physiological effect or psychological effect.
Okay. So look, as this object is coming over them.
This is the supposed trajectory. Okay. This is an artistic vision.
I understand.
We look to this and think about it. Well, I could make some coordinates here. Translate that in coordinates. Quite a hard work, very hard work to be precise in the measurements. And we can get this. This is the reality of the situation. Each point is one person.
Right.
And this linear draw
is where the object
is the path of the sun.
Okay.
I do not call it the object because I don't know what it is.
Okay.
The sun comes from south to north. Second question. Everyone knows that the sun goes from east to west,
right.
Not from the south to the north. More people around 20 miles south of Fatima saw the miracle of the sun at north. That's another crazy question about this. We have here about 31 phenomena, over 28 people. Look, heat and the instantly dry off the coats occurs more than 80% of these people. We have a heavy rain, very heavy rain.
So everyone's very wet.
Everyone is with clothes wet.
Mm-hmm.
The sun goes over their heads, 100 feet in height, and the wet, the draw of the clothes is almost instantly. The
clothes become instantly dry.
Even the umbrellas get dry. And that is very strange.
Very strange.
So we have several phenomena occurring during this second kind of the miracle of the sun. Understand? We have two kinds of miracles. Mm-hmm. First, the dance of the sun. The sun is not approaching the earth. And the second phase is when the sun comes down and goes a flyby over the heads of the people.
Okay.
With this psychological, physiological, and physics phenomena. That's
so it's very complex.
Very complex because we cannot explain what it is.
Okay.
What happens?
A lawyer who was present at the time described seeing a dull silver disc in the sky. So that's just one witness who saw this object, whatever it was.
Yes, I'm aware of that. The lawyer, it's a very wise and a very
knowledgeable man.
Knowledgeable man.
Okay.
And he wrote that to him, some kind of silver disc goes between them and the sun.
Okay.
He's the only one saying that. Okay. He wrote by his head.
Okay.
We work with the papers of that time.
1917.
Okay. Not papers that comes 20, 30, 40 years after that.
I understand. So you're drawing your information from the witness testimonies, the handwritten testimonies, exactly. 1917. Yeah, facts. Okay.
Facts.
And a fact is something which is true.
Of course, in Fatima, something happened.
Something happened. Okay.
I cannot deny if there is the Mother of Christ or not. I don't know that.
And we're not even going to address that. Yeah, we're not really addressing
to me,
that. People can believe what they want to believe.
Of course. For me, the most interesting part is the miracle of the sun.
I agree.
This is the original draw made by the husband of Fina d'Armada. The artist is Claro Fangio. And you look to this draw, the position is quite correct, person by person. And the artistic inspiration led Claro Fangio to do a small curve in the trajectory of the sun in the flyby over the heads of the people. When you took these parameters into a computer, like we do, turn it into a table with coordinates, you get this. This is the reality. This line is the flyby, the path of the sun. These points are the people. And amazingly, if you do a linear correlation in order to obtain this line, you saw that the intersection of this cross is the point where the three of the apparitions are. And the error is only 6 meters. We talk here about 20 yards of error. And that is quite good for this kind of study. 100 years after, we could do a correlation between the point, exact point of the passing of the flyby of the sun. And our error is only 6 meters. We are talking about terrain that are 400 meters by 300 meters. 6 meters of error is nothing in this kind of situation. But we did it.
All right, so when I think about this situation, I can look at it and find 3 manifestations that God has said in the Word that He has done, whether it's Ezekiel's wheel inside of a wheel, or whether it is the signs in the heavens that Jesus said we'd see in the last days, or Gideon's fleece and the people's clothing drying up and instantaneously. But then I also think, could this be the fallen ones? Could this be the strong delusion? Remember, World War I's raging. People are clinging to hope. They need hope, okay? And all of a sudden, these 3 kids have this encounter in which Mary tells them there's going to be a miracle on October 13th, 1917, and 100,000 people show up. Could this have been set up by the fallen ones to create the spirit of diversion, if you will, a spirit of delusion?
In 1987, Fina de Armada and Dr. Joaquim Fernandez participated in a debate with a group of priests discussing their co-authored book in regard to the events of Fatima and the miracle of the sun. One priest, Father Gois, was present at Fatima and was an eyewitness to the events of October 13, 1917. Although he was not present at the debate, his testimony was played back for its participants. This is what he had to say about the miracle of the sun.
O disco tornou-se bronzeado. Girava circularmente, mas não em volta do eixo, se descrevendo, assim, simples em volta de eixo, e dando a impressão de que descia a ponto de nos convencermos que ficávamos esmagados pelo sol.
Francisco, we've heard a lot of information, an overwhelming amount of information in the last couple of days. And there seems to be, from Joaquim Fernandez, from Frederica, of course, her mother, Fina de Armada, from the Manuels that we interviewed, and of course, Raul, there seems to be an overwhelming amount of evidence that points to something other than the sun that actually manifested on October 13th. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's really clear that it couldn't have been the sun. I mean, the sun is huge. So if it moves, there will be a lot of consequences in the entire solar system. And I mean, the sun is so much bigger than Earth that couldn't have descended in Fatima.
Sure.
So something else was there. And also, Fina de Armada was able to read some of the testimony from newspapers from that time, etc., that clearly, at least one lawyer, Almeida Garret, one medical doctor, Pereira Gens, they all talk about a silvery type of disc, a dull disc, silvery dull disc that flashed lights, that turned itself rapidly, that projected lights on the clothes of the people, on the soil, on the trees. The sun doesn't do that. And other things that people also experienced, and they were so amazed by what they were seeing that they could not explain. They didn't have words to explain what they were seeing. Like it had been raining all night long, during the day as well. People before the miracle, the supposed miracle, they were wet, completely wet. there are photographs of people holding their umbrellas because it was raining. And suddenly when that object, that phenomena, whatever, came, some people were the path where the object was
what Raoul calls the flyby.
The flyby, not only the flyby, but because the object made 3 revolutions, spinning and then the flyby, and that particular path where Raoul and the other people from the team, Joaquim Fernandes, Fina, etc., José Sotomayor, they all were able to pinpoint several people that were placed where the object came and flew, and people had their clothes dried, the soil dried, there were some skin burns, people felt heat, and also other people that were in nearby places report like the hood of the cars being ripped off, the windshields of some of the cars just shattered, sudden combustion of the gasoline. So it was an amazing. People were really frightened. Some people refer that as being the end of the world because they were so frightened by what they were seeing. That it was not the sun.
It was not the sun. So I think it's fair to say that something occurred in Fatima, which we could either call supernatural or certainly the phenomena that was there was something otherworldly, something not normal, something that defies our physics and most people's worldview. And of course, this takes a step into the whole exopolitics movement, of which you're part of. How does this transfer, let's say, into what we're seeing now in modernity, the present day, with the unbelievable amount of UFO sightings? Do you think there's any correlation between what happened in 1917 and what's happening today?
The exopolitics movement, at least one of the interpretations, is the study of the political, religious, geopolitical implications of the ET presence. So, back to Fatima, or back to Roswell, or whatever, beings from other dimensions, other worlds, not human beings, that come here. Well, yeah, there's an implication. What to do with it? What politics? What?
How do we address it?
Yeah, exactly. How do we address it? How much it can change the whole society?
Sure, it can.
It can change the whole paradigm.
Yes, the whole, and do it very quickly.
Yeah, and do it very quickly. Yes.
What are we to do with all the information we just heard from our experts? I think we've presented what I would consider to be overwhelming evidence that an object other than the sun appeared in Fatima 100 years ago. Please remember that in 1917, the words UFOs or flying saucers did not exist. What would you have called the object had you been standing in the field that day? Witnesses described seeing a dull silver disk that passed very low over the heads of the 70,000 people gathered there. There's no doubt that something extraordinary occurred at Fatima. However, it is my opinion, and that of others who have spent hundreds of hours gathering the information, that it was an object of some kind. If that is the case, then was it what we would call in modernity a UFO? Please remember that most of the people gathered there had their worldviews rocked and changed forever. We are told from the biblical prophetic narrative that there would be false signs and lying wonders in the last days. Was this event a harbinger of deception? Only you can judge that for yourselves. But there were other phenomena that also occurred that day, which we will explore in the second episode of this series. People's clothes suddenly were dry. Car windshields cracked and broke. Automobile engines wouldn't start. There were burns on some of the people. There was also a fourth witness that remained silent and hidden away for decades, and only through Fina de Armada's exhaustive research did she become known. There was also another apparition in a different location that occurred a day before May 13th, 1917, and we visited that. Finally, we will explore the ancient history of Portugal. And what we found was evidence of a serpent cult and worship of the goddess Diana. This is the same entity that Paul talks about in the book of Acts. I'll be back soon with another episode of the Watchman Chronicles.
If you found this information interesting, you may be interested in some of our other books and films. In their own words, UFOs Are Real is a hard-hitting expose on the UFO phenomena from people who have had encounters and real-life experiences with entities, orbs, close encounters, abductions, hybrid beings, implants, and more. Go to www.thewatchmanchronicles.com. There's a subject that most people regard as fringe. Yet the people in this film have seen something.
I've seen a UFO. I've seen a UFO.
And I saw a UFO.
And I saw a UFO.
And I've seen a UFO. A UFO.
People from all walks of life have come on the record in their own words, and their testimony is true.
Join me as we explore the folks who have had encounters in their own words.